Welcome to this new episode of The Door Off is Always Open. Now this one is a little bit long, but it's more than interesting, I think. We have interviews with Japa Studio from Morocco. We have a nice slideshow from street photography in Morocco. We have interviews with Corey about 3D. We have interviews with, well, you know what? You just have to watch the whole episode. But now I'm out in the cold. And why am I in the cold? Well, we're with our friends of Camera Nu. And I'm going to talk to Brian about a street camera. And I really like this camera. It's the FujiFilm, and we call it the sexy one, but it's actually the X-E1. So let's go inside, and we're gonna find Brian. Hey Brian, how are you?
Hey, yeah, fine. How
Long time no see.
It was a time ago.
Yeah, last time was with the street photography episode, I think.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot since then. I love the street photography
Yeah,
style.
I made a lot of nice videos since then.
Yeah, I know. It's and I met up with Jay Mizell in New York.
I saw
Went
it.
to his home, and man, he gave me so much tips. And shooting in New York is like a shooting gallery, right?
It's fun. It's always fun to be there. Yeah.
When you go to Emmeloord, it's again like nothing happens. Hey, anyway,
The market in Emmeloord is something different.
it's totally different. Now, when we talked at that time, I also shot with FujiFilms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now when you go to street photography, FujiFilm is really taking over the market.
For sure.
Yeah. Now, when you look, the only choices they had was the X100, but they had the fixed lens. And
Fixed
that's
lens,
not
yeah,
something
yeah,
for
yeah.
me, the wide angle. They use the
And the
X10,
X Pro.
that's nice,
Yeah.
and the X Pro one.
Yeah.
Now the X Pro one, I love the camera. It's an amazing camera, but it's expensive.
It's cool. It's very good. Yeah.
Now they release something, and I don't know if you know it, but of course you know it because
course
you're
I
the
know it.
salesman of Camera Nu.
Of course I know it. Yeah.
But this is the
XA1.
How do you call it?
XA1.
The XA1.
Yeah.
You know how I call it?
Huh?
The sexy one.
Yeah.
It's an amazing camera. And you know what I really like? Wally. It's the
Great.
Wally strobe.
Yeah. You can use it, and you can use it against the wall.
Yeah.
You can bounce
I already
it.
told you that, right?
It's very
You can
good.
use
Yeah,
bounce
yeah,
flange.
yeah.
So now he stole my tip. That's Brian, you know, it's always the same with that guy. Now let's talk a little bit about how Fuji changed the market. Because when you looked at the old days, you had the DSLRs, you had medium format, you had large format. But when you do street photography, it's always like, of course with analog film you had the rangefinders.
Yeah.
But it was mostly dominated by DSLRs. Now when you wanted to point and shoot
DSLR
camera.
or the Leicas. Or
Yeah, or the Leicas.
Yeah,
But when you wanted to point and shoot camera, you had a few choices. It was small and play, or DSLR.
Yeah.
Now Fuji stormed the market with their new sensor because the images, and I always compare it to people, you know, it's let's compare 60 megapixels on a Fuji. I dare to compare it to 22 megapixels on a DSLR because it's razor sharp due to their new sensor, the X-Trans.
The X-Trans sensor has a huge benefit because of the missing low-pass filter.
Yeah.
The low-pass filter isn't there anymore. It's not needed to cancel out the moire pattern, for example, because normally they use a Bayer pattern in a sensor, and this sensor hasn't got the Bayer pattern, and that makes it extremely better to have colors recorded without the problem of the moire.
They did actually the same
It's
thing as with film.
very good, and it's extremely sharp.
Yeah, they did the same thing with film. I always compare it to when you look at film and you look at the grain structure, it's totally random.
It's
now
random,
when you go to digital camera, what you see is the grain structure is like totally structurized. And that gives you a lot of problems.
On the new Fujifilm, it isn't.
No, and that's amazing.
It's the old way around again.
But now what I loved about I call it the sexy one, is when it was released, that it's actually, I was a little bit afraid because it's so much cheaper than the X Pro one. Yeah. But now when I compared it to, and I brought it with me in New York, and it's incredibly fast with focus. I don't see any difference between the X Pro 1 images and the X-E1. Plus,
there is a slight difference, but I think it's a difference.
Yeah, maybe if you shoot them side to side.
Side to side, yeah. If you shoot them side to side, then it's even in the advantage of the X-A1, because I think it's a little bit more, without the structure. It's even sharper.
It's even sharper.
Yeah,
okay.
It's even nicer.
And actually, the only thing you're missing is the OVF. So you only have the EVF now, but the EVF is really great on this one.
How often do you use it?
The OVF, I never used it because I didn't like the way it focused. So I was always on the EVF. So,
yeah.
But hey, that's one of the reasons I switched to Sony, right? So in the future episodes of The Doorhof is Always Open, we will do some tips with you guys from Camera Nu.
Great.
Because you're still my favorite store to come.
We love to give tips. So
that's cool. And for now, I would like to thank you very much. And we're going to watch the rest of the episode of The Doorhof is Always Open.
It was a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this time I can't buy anything because Anne stole my wallet. So I have to go home without stuff.
She did a great job because he always leaves with lots of stuff.
Yeah, she carries it, so she's not here now. So that's my excuse. So okay, I will see you next time.
See you
and
next
have
time.
fun. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Now, a while ago I did a review on my blog about the Sony A99. And at that point, well, I had everything covered. I had the X10 as a point and shoot from Fujifilm. I had the X Pro 1, a great street camera. Then I used the Canon DSLR for all the sports work, everything you need a DSLR for. And of course the medium format camera for the studio. Now, I never intended to switch to Sony. So let me give you a little bit of insight what happened. Sony asked me to do the press introduction in Dubai for the Alpha 99. And at that point, the Alpha 99 was not yet released. So they sent me a version with a 2470 from Carl Zeiss and an 85. And to be honest, at first, I loved the quality of the images. That was amazing. The dynamic range, great. However, one thing I didn't like about the Sony, and that was the EVF, the electronic viewfinder. I'm very used to a normal viewfinder. We call that the OVF, an optical viewfinder. So in my first review, I actually said it's a great camera, it's wonderful, it has great autofocus, the images are great. However, the EVF, well, it's not my cup of tea. In my second review, I already changed my opinion a little bit. And I said, you know what, EVF, I know why some people love it. And I have to be honest, the third review, well, I love the EVF. So much that in Dubai I made some images of a fisherman and it was strongly backlit. And I took the shot with the Canon and I was like, oh, I forgot to do spot metering. So the whole image was wrong. When you do that with the Sony, the nice thing about the EVF is it's a what you see is what you get viewfinder. Meaning, if I look through the viewfinder and I focus, I will actually see what's going on. The moment I press the shutter, that's the image I'm going to record. And an EVF has a lot more extra options. You can of course do your focus tracking, and because it's an EVF, you see everything going on. It's like, well, looking at the Terminator movie. Everything in the EVF moves around and you can really see what's going on. Now, some people will say, but Frank, with Canon you have all the lenses, why switch to Sony? For me it's very simple, it's image quality. And again, I love the Canon. There's nothing wrong with 5D Mark III. It's still one of my favorite cameras ever. However, because I also shoot medium format, I'm used to that really sharp image with high dynamic range. And now when I look at my Sony images, it's no medium format, don't get me wrong. But let's say that all the DSLRs are like here. This is medium format. The Sony lies right in the middle. And it's a really nice camera to hold. It's a little bit smaller than the Canon. It's really tight grip. And what I love again is the EVF. What you see is what you get. And you have the display on the back. Now what you see here is I closed it because that saves batteries. Because that's the only thing about the Sony. It eats batteries. But that's also why we have the grip. And Sony is very smart with the grip. They included 3 batteries. So you have 2 in the grip and 1 in the body. That means you can walk around all day. You don't have to turn your camera off. And at the end of the day, you will still have the camera body battery, that will still be full. So we'll use those 2 batteries. The display you can flip over, and that's great because if you want a low angle and you don't want to sit on the floor, you can use the display to see what's going on. You can also make self-portraits. So you also see this in the display. And of course, if you want to hold it on top of your head, when you're in a crowd, you can do it like this. So the flip over display, that's something that I really like. Now also the autofocus system. It's very, very quick. What I do when I do street photography, I will do object tracking and face recognition because I love to shoot people. Now, what I do with the object tracking is I will pinpoint my object, lock the focus and have face recognition, and the camera will just follow my object. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, and in the EVF I see a little square and it's following my object. And it does it really, really fast. Now, if you have the new lenses of Sony, you can use the new focusing system, and that's awesome. It's really quick and it has depth map assistance, so it's really accurate. If you have the old lenses, no problem at all. You can still use the great autofocus system. Now one more thing, it has a limiter on it. For every lens you can set the focus limiting. Now this is great for guys shooting sport because you don't want your subject to be, let's say, 1 meter from you. So why should you let your lens focus to 1 meter? Just set the focus limiter on, let's say, 10 meters. And it will focus only up to 10 meters away from you. And you can set it on both points, further away and closer. And there's a lot more about the camera that I like the built-in GPS. Every image you take has its GPS coordinates, so when you import it in Lightroom, you can see where you took the image. But in the end, it all boils down to one very, very important thing: image quality. And that's something where the Sony really shines. Dynamic range. We've took some shots with this camera and people, why did you shoot HDR? I said, it wasn't an HDR. In Photoshop, Lightroom, the only thing I did, open up the shadows, close the highlights, and it looks like an HDR shot. So in the end, that's the reason I switched to the Sony. Now, a lot of people will go like, okay, should I run out and buy a Sony camera, the Alpha 99? Well, let me put it this way. If you now have a step-in Nikon or Canon with a kit lens, switch over to the Sony because you will really love the quality, if you're looking for a professional body, of course. If you already have a Canon or Nikon with a more expensive glass, a pro body, I think it's a shame of money to just throw that away and get into a new system. Because in the end, probably Canon and Nikon will also catch up, but then Sony will release something new and Sony will be better. But if you're looking for a pro body at this point, and you're shooting with something which, well, didn't cost you an arm and a leg, I would really advise you to switch, or at least check out the Sony Alpha 99. Because for me, it was a total surprise. I never expected me to sell my Canon gear. And in the studio, we now switch even between the Sony and a medium format, all because of the amazing image quality from the sensor. So, the Alpha 99, I take a picture of you, and check out the camera. It's a really great professional body. Hey Corey.
Hi Frank.
We're here at Kelby Media Group, right?
Uh-huh.
So, maybe for the people who don't know you, you're like a 3D wizard, right? But you do a lot more.
I actually do, yeah, been using Photoshop now for, man, almost better than 15 years now. I started back in version 2, and of course, 3D's only been introduced in the last few versions, and it really just grabbed me, because I've seen a lot of feature film, big movie fan, of course, and I've seen a lot of feature films, and a lot of the films these days are really incorporating a lot of 3D design, and I never really had the patience to really dive into a heavy 3D application like Maya or anything like that. And when 3D came along in Photoshop, I really just dove right in and just, really just spent a lot of time experimenting with it, and just things really started to click and, started to materialize right before me, and I started really doing really cool things that I always dreamt that I wanted to do as a designer. And I discovered I could do this in Photoshop, which was a program I was obviously very familiar with, having used it for years. And it's just getting better. I mean, this latest version, I'm discovering even newer things that I didn't in the last version, and it's just taking it that much further. So much so that I've really gotten an in with the Adobe engineers, Zorana and Pete Falco, who actually are the ones who developed 3D in the Photoshop, and they've actually asked for my input on how I can, help as a user, help things better, and really kind of drive it and see what it's missing and things like that, and kind of help my creative process. And they really have, and they really do listen, and it's really come a long way since then. And hopefully in the next version, I've actually talked with them a lot of things about things I would like to see, and hopefully in the next version we'll see a lot more things come about. well.
Now, when you talk about the movies, now a lot of people will think Photoshop 3D is a gimmick.
No.
You will never use it for movies because that's Maya, that's all the other stuff. Now, what's your opinion about it? Is it just a gimmick in Photoshop, just something to make one still, or do you see the future like maybe Photoshop will be used for movies?
Well, and you know, and Photoshop does support video and animation features, and it has a limited extent. And I certainly tell people, I'm like, well, if you're going to get heavy into animation, video, and even 3D and stuff, then you'll probably still want to use programs like 3D or Cinema 4D or Maya or even After Effects or something like that, which I use actually if I'm doing heavier animation. But when you have the ability of Photoshop, and you know as well as I mean, when you get in Photoshop, there's so many things you can do with static images. When you can take it to the next level and do all that with 3D, and they actually have the ability to animate 3D in Photoshop. Now, I've played with it just a little bit, and I've been able to achieve what we'd call cinematic effects in images. And now I'm not saying that you're going to see work done in 3D and on the big screen anytime soon. I'm not saying that will never happen, but not anytime soon. But at least for designers at a lower level, they can actually achieve stuff you would see in the theaters and on movie posters now in Photoshop, and it's really come a long way.
We also thought nobody would ever shoot an episode of, let's say, House with a 5D Mark II, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
so somebody will try it just because it can be done.
Because it can be done, absolutely, and it's always going to take that one person that really just does it. You know, everybody, because it's like you're saying, you know, there's a lot of people that think 3D is a gimmick, and there's just either they don't want to mess with it, and I'm not saying I'm trying to prove those people wrong, but I always get the attitude of, you know, these people are like, you know, you can't really do that in Photoshop, and I'm like, oh yeah. Let's see about that. And that's what kind of drives my creativity is that, you know, I really want to see if it can be done. And then when I realize it can be done, all right, well, let's take it further. It's just, I'm never satisfied in a sense. And I guess that's a good thing because I'm constantly trying to make it better and better. You know, it's really come a long way. And I'm really excited about it. I'm really excited to see what the future holds for it because it's a niche I've really grabbed a hold of and really run away with. And it's very few people, and there's a handful of people that are actually playing around with 3D, and more people are getting on board with it. I mean, since I've been really pushing it, and the tutorials we've been doing on the NAP site and such like that, it's really been pushing it a long way, and a lot more people are getting interested in it, and I'm getting that many more questions about it. So it's really encouraging to see that not just I'm just not doing it for my own benefit, but other people are benefiting from as well, and really driving it, and hopefully it'll become more of a staple of Photoshop, like the same way layer styles and brushes have become. You know, I'm hoping 3D becomes a part of that. The only drawback is that 3D itself is only part of the extended version of Photoshop. Unfortunately, if you have standard, then you don't have 3D available, and so it's the only thing that's part of the extended version. But hopefully one day it'll all roll one into one version, and more and
that's
more
why the Creative Cloud is nice, of course.
Absolutely. So
then
more and more
people,
out. Yes, absolutely. If you have the Creative Cloud, you can certainly get access to it and play around with it. And I'm always welcoming people's questions. You know, I know what I like to do in 3D, but that doesn't mean that's everything 3D can do. I mean, I'm always wanting people to tell me, well, you know, what have you seen, or what have you want to try and do? And I'm constantly trying to push not just my own creative abilities, but other people's to try and help them take it to the next step. So
okay. Now you teach a lot. You teach at Photoshop World. We're now at Kelby Training. You teach a lot at Kelby Training. Now, what is the question you get asked the most, and that you think, well, that's something that people should really realize that can be done with Photoshop and that can be done with 3D, and it's really easy, but people think it's really hard?
What is I get asked? Well, honestly, a lot of people ask is how do you start? You know, like you see something that inspires you, or see something in a movie or a poster, and it's like, where do you start? How do you get to the point where you figure it out in Photoshop? And largely it comes down to a lot of experimenting. You know, I know what things have worked for me in the past, and then I'll dive into a project and kind of reverse engineer it. I just look at something and I'm thinking, oh, well, I see, you know, this part of it, you know, there's something in Photoshop that could do this beveling effect here, I can try that. And I'm not always trying to copy something, you know, as it is. I'm trying to take pieces of parts, you know. There's rarely that much design today there's very little design today that's wholly original. Everybody's borrowing something from somebody, you know, a piece of this, piece of that. Filmmakers do it as well. I mean, even the best of filmmakers, like Steven Spielberg, still borrows ideas from other filmmakers and stuff like that. So it's finding that inspiration. That's probably what everybody is asking me, is where do you find the inspiration? And I said, it's all around you. I mean, all you have to do is go out in the world and look around, and it's there. It's just a matter of knowing how to recognize it, and then being able to make it your own. And that's what it's about, is just trying to find something and make it your own. And 3D is just another avenue for that. It's that next dimension.
Next dimension.
No pun intended there. But it's that next dimension of design. It's it's another avenue of saying, one thing I've always liked about Photoshop, even before 3D, is the ability to create something that nobody's ever seen before. I mean, I have an illustration degree. I went to art school back in the 90s, and I came from traditional illustration, painting and such like that. I don't really do that much anymore, but what I'd learned still applies in a digital realm. And I've been able to take that knowledge and go into Photoshop, and the meeting of those two worlds has just been a magical experience for me. And and being able to work at a company for Scott Kelby and such, and being able to reach as many people as I have has truly been a blessing. And it's added to my inspiration. All the people I've met on the road. I mean, guys, all the people I've taught with at Photoshop World, you, of course. I'm meeting so many people, not just from the U.S. here, but from around the world, like you guys. I mean, we've got instructors from Paris and London and everywhere coming around to
and Emmeloord, of course.
And everybody's coming around, and it's amazing to me, all the common interest. It just seems like such a widespread world, but yet we're all kind of this part of the same.
Yeah, it's a creative process.
The creative process is there, and we all have something to talk about. It's really been an inspiring road for me, and I just can't wait to see what the future brings. I really can't.
Okay, do you have something planned for the new Kelby training classes?
I do. I'm actually considering, not really considering, I'm actually in the process of developing an advanced 3D class. Now, up till now, because 3D has been so new in Photoshop, it's really just, you've kind of had to introduce it to the world, it's because it's just a brand new thing. It's just like, well, here's how it works in Photoshop, and here are the tools and such. I think it's getting to the point now where I can actually do something and take it to the next level and say, all right, now you're familiar with 3D, here's what you can really do with it. So hopefully by, probably going to be in the next version of Photoshop sometime next year, I'm going to do like an advanced series is what I'm hoping to do.
Cool.
Where it's really just taking 3D to that next level. No beginner stuff. This is only going to be for those that already are familiar with 3D. It's going to take it to that next level and show you how to achieve those cinematic effects you see in posters and movies and television and stuff like that.
I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, I'm really excited too. It's just the process alone is going to be a blast, so I really can't wait to see how people react to it, and I hope it's really exciting.
Now, for your tip, it's very difficult to explain something. Like you can of course say, well, you go to the layer menu there, you do this, you make your object here. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's nice if we just show a video with a clip.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So guys, Corey will show you now how to do a tip with 3D in Photoshop.
Cool, check it out.
Yeah, make sure you check it out.
Well, hi everyone, Corey Barker here yet again with more motion graphics fun here inside Photoshop CS6. Now there are, as I said before, video and animation capabilities now in both CS6 standard and extended versions of Photoshop, but in this video we're also going to add the element of 3D along with our video and animation. Now this, of course, limits it to just the extended version of Photoshop because the 3D capabilities are not in the standard versions, just the video capabilities. So you can kind of cheat it and play around with some of the elements that we're going to be playing with in this video. But again, we're going to be adding 3D to the mix here. And actually, as usual, this is inspired by another movie that's actually opening up this weekend. And it's the new Abraham Lincoln film that Steven Spielberg has produced, and looks like a really good film. And in the trailer, there's actually a very small snippet of the title that kind of comes up on screen, and it looks like the letters are made of this very subtle chrome effect, and there's some reflected elements in it that look, like a video clip is animated or in that reflection. And actually, you can achieve this in Photoshop, only Photoshop CS6 Extended, with just a few simple layer tricks and video layers and such like that. So let's first create the text element. So I'm actually going to go ahead and grab my text tool and just go ahead and click and set a text layer. And let's just kind of change it up a little bit. We'll actually do, instead of Lincoln, we'll just go with the first name. We'll do Abraham there. So we'll just kind of set that. And I'm using the all too typical font you see in a lot of movie titles, and that's Trojan Pro. And I'm actually using the bold version. Now, what I discovered, actually, when I first was experimenting with this, that I had done it with the regular version of the font. It was very thin and stylish looking. But when it went to 3D and actually I started applying the effects, it looked a little too thin. So I discovered by making it bold, you can actually compensate for that, the elements looking too thin, by making it a little bit bolder like this. So we're going to use the bold version of Trojan there. So Text is set. I've gone ahead and centered it in the middle of my document. Actually, the tracking on it looks a little like it could stand a little bit of adjustment. I'm going to space it out a little bit more. Just a little bit between that R and that A there. Maybe the B and the R looks a little too far apart. We'll just do that one. Now, in addition to that formatting of the text, I'm also going to change, make it visible again. I want the first and last letter to look a little bit larger, so I'm actually going to go ahead and highlight the center text here. Now let's open up the character panel. And I'm just going to go over here and drop the size down a little bit. And I'm also going to raise the baseline of this. Go down here where it's just below the vertical alignment. You got to set the baseline shift. I'm just going to increase that up a little bit until the tops of the letters are aligned with the top of the other two letters. And that creates a space underneath, making the title looking a little bit more stylish that way. Okay. So now let's go ahead and create the 3D. So I'm going to go into the 3D menu. Again, the 3D features are limited to just the extended version of Photoshop. So if you have Photoshop CS6 extended, you can go ahead and do this. Again, if you do not, you can certainly play around with the other effects that we're going to do, just not being able to do the 3D. So I'm going to go to 3D, new 3D extrusion from selected layer. It's going to go ahead and create the 3D extrusion. And I'm going to go ahead and select the word in my 3D panel here that represents the layer containing the 3D text. And over here in the properties panel, you'll notice we can change some of the properties. Now, by default, the extrusion depth here is at 1/16. I'm actually going to highlight that and drop it down to about 15. So I don't need a really deep extrusion on the text. It's really all about the front face of it. But it's going to make it very simple, just so it looks like there's some volume to the text. It has some 3D element to it. Now, again, the beauty of text and 3D inside Photoshop is that just below that extrusion setting, you see we have where we can change the color of the text as well as opening up the character panel, because the character panel that we used a moment ago is still active and live on this text over here. And you can actually, if you wanted to, so let's just say I wanted to go back to regular, I could certainly do that, and it will update the font through the character panel like that. But I'm actually going to go ahead and go back to bold here. And let's just undo that. And we'll just go back. Oh, I went back too far. Let's actually bring that back to 15 here. There we go. Okay. Now, what I actually want to do is adjust something about the formatting of the text. The space between the A and the B here on the end is a little bit too much, it looks like. So I'm just going to go into the Edit Source button here, and it will open the original document. And I can just go ahead and reformat that. I'm just going to close in that kerning a little bit. And all I've done is just place the cursor between the A and the B, and I'm holding down the Option key and hitting the left arrow several times until it closes in that gap a little bit more. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and close this and save those changes. You can see it updates the object and everything looks pretty good. All right. So now what I want to do is actually change the color. I set it to white whenever I was creating the 3D element because it was against a black background, and it just made it easier for the sake of visibility. But now that I've got it in 3D and it's formatted, I'm going to go ahead and change the color by simply clicking on this little color swatch next to the text in the properties panel here rather, and just making it black, and let's go ahead and click that. Okay. And I think the ground plane I don't really want to see right now, so I'm just going to go into the View menu and go to Show and just uncheck 3D ground plane there. There we go. So now, I'm going to go into the Properties panel. Again, I have that text element selected here in the 3D panel. And then over here in the Properties panel, I'm going to click on the third tab over for the cap settings. Now down here you see where it says Inflate. And we've got the inflate angle already set to a default 45 degrees. Now if I go and just increase the strength a little bit, you'll see the front face of that text kind of get rounded out. Notice it's going just kind of carving itself out a little bit. And looks like it's a little bit more of an edge to it. So it's got a contour to it now. So now I'm going to go in that 3D panel yet again, and this time I'm going to select a specific mesh, which in this case is the front inflation, which is that front element of the text there. And, well, let's actually make sure. There we go. Okay. So front inflation is selected. It's highlighted here in the 3D panel. So I'm going to go over here to the Properties panel, and the reflection setting is default set to 0. I'm going to go ahead and boost that up all the way to 100%. So what I want to do is add an animated element that's going to reflect in the face of this text. I'm going to use this through an image-based light. Now, you go to the environment settings. Now, again, inside the 3D panel here, the very, very top of the list in the 3D panel is a object called environment. I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. And in the properties panel, we now see all the environment settings. Now at the very top, you see this IBL, which is for image-based light. Now I'm going to go ahead and create, or rather load, a document. Now the document I'm going to load is actually this movie right here. You can actually load a movie file as well as a static image for these mesh documents like this on a 3D object. Now notice this file is just merely some clouds, it's just animating in space, and it's just got the cloud movement and everything like there, so there's some really interesting things happening here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this small folder icon and choose Load Texture. And I'm just going to add that movie file and go ahead and click Open. And you'll notice that it now reflects that object. Now it's showing in the background just because it's in edit mode for that image-based light. And I can actually click on this with the 3D tool and move that around, as you can see right there. Now notice the element is moving in the text, in the front face of the text there. And that's looking pretty good. Now if I also go and open up my timeline, and let's go ahead and create video timeline. Now this is where I get the video aspect of this. I'm going to take that playhead and play through, and you'll notice that the video is playing and reflecting on the surface of that text, giving me that interesting element of a reflected environment through a video file. Now that's pretty cool. Now the problem here is, well, it's not necessarily a problem, but I don't necessarily want it to be in color. I just want it to be a black and white reflected element. So let's go into that image-based light and just click on that folder icon once again, and this time choose Edit Texture. It's going to open up that video document. Now right in here, I'm going to go ahead and just add a black and white adjustment layer. So you can see it makes the image black and white. I can go in here and adjust these sliders to make certain areas darker or lighter, depending on what I want to do. But again, the important thing here is to remove the color of that video file. And if I go over here into this playhead and just play through, you can see the entire video has now been converted to black and white. So let's go ahead and close this and save the changes. And it will update. Now the video is black and white in a reflected environment. And if I go and just click on the opposite layer there and just kind of drag through here, you'll notice that now, and it just looks a little rough, and that's because it's in draft mode right now. And if I were to render it out in full render mode, it would actually be nice and clean. But I don't have time in this video to actually do that because rendering it out in high definition actually does take a while. But you can see if I drag through with my playhead, you can see the preview of the video file playing in the text right there. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to hit my spacebar. There's a little bit of a render here. Let's just kind of see what we've got going on here. And that's pretty cool that I can see that video playing and it's acting as a reflected environment on that text. There you go. You have that right there. Isn't that pretty cool? And again, it's a separate element. It's reflecting that environment because of the 3D properties. And because we've kind of carved out the front face of that text, it's reflecting it in a very stylish way. Now, another aspect to the text I saw in the preview was that there was not just the reflected elements moving in the text, but the whole object was moving itself. So I'm actually going to go in here into these animation properties and twirl it down, revealing all the other animated properties here. And we're just going to animate the scene position. So I'm just going to click on the stopwatch here and just set a keyframe here. And I'm actually going to take this and make sure that when you're animating the scene that you select scene here in the 3D panel. And I'm just going to use the 3D slide tool right here. It's up here in the options bar when you have the move tool selected, and it's the fourth one over. And if you hold down the shift key and click and drag up, it'll actually push that text back in space. It appears to be getting smaller. It's merely pushing it back in 3D space. And that's where the animation is going to start. I'm going to take the playhead and move it a little bit forward, not too far, maybe a few seconds. And this is something I always still tell people. When you are creating these motion graphics inside Photoshop, keep them relatively short. It's not really designed for creating really extensive 3D or motion graphics like you would in After Effects, but it does have the capability of creating some pretty impressive effects in animations that are just a few seconds long. So I'm just going to go to about the 2-second mark, and again go back inside of this file, hold the Shift key down, and now click and drag down. And that's going to bring the text forward in 3D space. Now when I release my mouse, you'll notice it creates a new keyframe for that new position. Now if I go and take this playhead back in space, and let's go ahead and just hit the space bar. Now we'll notice that not only is the text animating forward, but that video file, its reflected environment, is also playing as well, and thus giving me that reflected text as well as the movement. So it's actually moving a little bit slow, or a little fast. So let's move those keyframes a little bit further apart, and you'll see now those elements are playing through. And now we've got a pretty stylized looking piece of text happening here. So again, with the capabilities of video and animation in both standard and extended, you have a lot of possibilities. But in addition to the 3D capabilities in CS6 Extended, you can see what you can do here is by adding your mesh texture map files, not just with static images, but also with video files. You can get some pretty interesting effects in just a matter of minutes. Now, when you are ready to go ahead and render this out in high res, you would simply go to File, go to Export, and go to Render Video, and set your output settings here. You can do H.264, high quality, and then set the size and everything like that. But the key here is, because we have this as a 3D element, you're going to have to go down here to the bottom of the render window where it says 3D quality in the render options section, and make sure that this is set to ray traced final, and it will render it out in high res, so you won't have those jagged edges right there. It's just doing that, again, like I said, in draft mode, so you can actually see the preview rather quickly without it having a lot of jumping. But you want to make sure you do the ray trace final. I will warn you though, if you do ray trace final and it's a animation that's, you know, several seconds, plan on waiting a while for it to render. It's rendering it in high res, so it's going to take a little while to render each frame. And of course, this varies depending on the speed of your computer, but in any case, it's going to take some time when you do that ray trace final. But again, you're going to end up with a product that is very cool, very professional looking in no time at all.
So I hope you liked the video. We're now back with Corey in, well, at the Kelby Training Studio. And Corey, thank you so very much.
Absolutely, no problem.
And I love that tip. Thank you so very much. And I'm going to try it myself.
Absolutely, I hope you do.
Yeah.
Now in this small video I want to explain something about the Phottix Odin system. Now when I switched from Canon to Sony, there was one problem. I love the way that Canon has their new strobe system. You have wireless transmission between the strobes and your camera, and you have a display on top of your camera where you can set all the settings from your strobes. And a nice thing, you don't need line of sight. Like the older systems, you needed line of sight, and outside that's terrible. If you move around your model, sometimes strobes won't go off. It's a terrible system. So on the Canon, I always use the Pocket Wizards TT series, and I love those. Those have wireless transmission over radio signals, and those are great. Now Canon released the new system, and I use the 600 strobes and of course the transmitter. And I love the way that the display works, because then you don't have to go into the menus. Now when I switched to Sony, that was something I really missed. Now the guys from Phottix, they contacted me and they said, Frank, you know, we have the Odin system. Try it out. And they sent me a set, and man, it's awesome. And they also have it for Canon and Nikon. How it works is you have one transceiver, and you have 4 channels and 3 groups. So you can set several strobes in 3 different groups. For example, the background, the foreground, or accent lights. And on the camera, you have a display. This is called the transmitter. And you can set everything from the display very, very quickly. You can add flash exposure compensation, you can go to manual, and you can zoom your strobes. And the nice thing about the system, it works ETTL via radio signals. So you don't need line of sight. So when I move around my model like this, I have no problem at all keeping the strobes firing, because I don't need any line of sight. Now outside in the bright sun, that's a really big advantage. And the price? Well, they're not as expensive as you think. So check out Phottix and order the Odin system for Canon, Nikon or Sony. They rock. Hey Mahmoud, welcome to the DOORhof is Always Open, our video web podcast.
Thank you.
And I'm in the beautiful Morocco, Casablanca, right?
Yes, indeed, Casablanca.
Yeah. And the last 2 days I've been a guest of you in your studio, and we went through some photographic stuff. And what blew me away was the impact you guys have on the Moroccan market for photography. So can you tell our viewers a little bit about the company you run?
Well, so it's the Yapa Photo Studio. It's a young company. We created it in 2008. And basically we try to increase a little bit the level of photography in Morocco, because in this country basically the level of photography is close to zero, because it's not part of our culture, really, photography. And of course we cannot be blind to the recent developments in this sector in Europe. Morocco is 14 kilometers from Spain, so we thought there was an opportunity to actually get some inspiration and propose to our customers some things that they've never seen. And thankfully people were responsive to what we could offer in photography since then.
Now, what kind of services do you offer? Because you do weddings, you do portraits, you do your own printing. I saw you do a lot with framing.
Exactly. We see ourselves as a one-stop shop for image. We do everything that's related to image. It could be photo or video as well. And we're completely integrated. Why we're integrated? For different reasons. First of all, because there are not so many actors in this, so we need to do everything by ourselves because there is no one else to do it for us. That's one reason. Second reason is also because the market is not so big. So unfortunately, the Moroccan market is not big enough so we can specialize in studio shooting or only prints or only wedding photography. So we have to be polyvalent and do many things, so we can also, of course, have some revenues and be able to develop ourselves and reinvest in our business.
Now, when I look at your business, you told me it's very difficult, for example, to get paper. Where's the problem that you can't get like seamless paper? Because you guys have to ship it from America and from Europe. Are there not even like photography retail stores over here?
That comes down to the same problem. There is no one who buys those papers. We're actually the only studio open for people to come in and have their shootings. So there are some independent photographers, but most of them they have some tricks to to have some backgrounds the way they want, maybe some just piece of fabric that they stick to the wall, or but so of course there is no market for these kind of products. There is no photography stores, there is no store that sells cameras. So basically most of the things we have, most of the equipment and material that we use for prints and everything, we import them either from the US or Europe mostly.
Okay, now when you look at Morocco, it's an Islamic country.
Yes.
How does it work? Because I, of course, know how it works because I already asked you this afternoon. Now, a lot of people who will watch will say, okay, because it's an Islamic country, probably you can't send your wife to the photo studio to take a picture. Or you will never ever see a beautiful, glamorous shot of a woman in a photo studio in that kind of country. Now, yesterday we went to a restaurant and we saw the belly dancers.
Yes.
That's glamorous.
That is.
For me, it was like, wow, that this can happen. But can you explain for our viewers what your viewing is on it? And maybe paint them another picture than they already have in their mind from this side of the world.
Of course. I think, in my point of view, it's not only about religion. It's also a cultural aspect of it. In Eastern countries, I can also enlarge this aspect to Eastern countries, and that includes the North Africa, for example, the Middle East, and also China and the Eastern countries, Asia, who are also more conservative countries. The culture of image is not the same in these countries than in Western countries, so we're not used to that. It's also a question of education. We cannot do this because it's not part of our codes. No. Nudity is not something that we see on television programs, or we don't even talk too much about it. So it's mostly cultural than religious. Of course, the religion is also a part of it. It's not stated as is, but it's not the values that are present in the religion aspect. So I think it's mostly cultural. But in our case, for example, as photography is something that's kind of still today as a luxury product. So our customers mostly are class B plus A in terms of marketing segments customers, so people who are pretty, they have the means for this kind of products to have shootings or big prints and all that. And mostly those people, they have more a Western mindset. So for them, it's easier to imagine, you know, to have some shootings a little bit less dressed, not completely nude,
No,
but less dressed. They're more open to this kind of products. Of course, if you go to less developed areas of the country, that's not even, I mean, photography, first of all, is not something that exists for them, and of course nudity or other aspects is not also part, but it's mostly cultural, more than religious, I would say.
Okay. Now, when you talked about cultural this afternoon, you said something that I really didn't know, that when you go really long back, when you look at, for example, the Egyptians, when you look at Catholic, you always see figures of humans.
Yes.
Now, you told me this afternoon something, and then I went back, and I'm always very interested in culture. And indeed, I found it very interesting that what you told me actually was that in the old times, so really, really long back,
Yes.
people couldn't paint or draw images of humans. Now, we visited in Dubai, we visited a mosque, and there's a lot of artwork there, but it's indeed always, it's little pieces of, how do you call it, mosaics.
Mosaic, yes.
And indeed, when you said it, I never saw a human.
Indeed.
And that's something, of course, in a culture, indeed, what you then miss. And that's why I love what you guys are doing with the photography, because you aim very high. You want to be the best photography studio in Morocco, right?
That's what we're aiming towards, and we are, thankfully, we are going in the right direction. And of course, we need a lot of work, and we're going that way. As I was saying, it's the eye has to be educated. It's also about education. Picture education is, image education is something that comes through time. And as you are saying now, as indeed we were talking about this, the artistic aspect of creation had nothing to do with human pictures. It was, so all the artists were focusing then energy on creating things that were based on materials like wood sculptures on ceilings or mosaics and all that. So this we had basically to translate the energy, the artistic energy, to this kind of works rather than picturing humans, and that's why maybe we're still a little bit late on that aspect in these countries.
But you guys are running. I saw you photographers, and they are really creative. So I'm really looking forward to their work. Now, what I found interesting is when I took my camera to Dubai, and I went, for example, to the Old Souk, the gold market, people loved being photographed. Even the guys with the covering, or they didn't mind me pointing the camera towards them. Some did mind. Now, yesterday I was shooting a sunset. And a couple went by, and I actually didn't shoot because I didn't find the couple interesting. They waited for at least 20 minutes until we left the beach. And then she came towards Anouk, and the problem is everybody here speaks French. And my French is je ne parle pas français. That's about everything I do, and some other stuff I can do on camera. And with hands and like this, she asked, "Did you take our picture?" I said, "No." And she kept asking, because you pointed the camera towards us. That was what I could. And it took us 5 minutes to convince the lady that we didn't take a picture. Now, she waited for 20 minutes for us to come off the beach to ask us that question. On one hand, you could say that's being polite, because what I find is everywhere the people here are incredibly polite. They will do whatever you want. They are very, very friendly towards you. On the other hand, also on the beach, some boys came by and they were like, "Take my picture, mister," and they loved it. And he had a shirt on from a Dutch soccer team, so I loved that picture. And some people were like, the moment you point your camera, they will start shouting and cursing at you in French. And I would go like, man, I only want to shoot. I have like a 24mm, and he was like all the way over there. I couldn't even shoot him.
Yes.
So what's your opinion about that? Is that just my bad luck yesterday night, or is that really something from Morocco compared to Dubai?
I think these were young people.
No, the middle-aged people, those are the ones that actually were offended by me pointing a camera somewhere where they walked, but it's a busy beach.
Yes, I think it's just the fact that they were not so much used to interactions with maybe foreigners in that part of the city you were in, I think. And also maybe an excess of energy. I think we have, Morocco is a very young population, and unfortunately a lot of them spend their time running around, walking around in the streets, wandering around with no jobs, or maybe they don't go to school, and so they try to focus their energy on things they've seen. So you were something different from what they used to see. Normally they were just maybe exercising on the beach, playing some soccer, just walking around, telling stories, and then boom, you arrive with your camera, a couple, and you look different, and all of that. So of course they want to make their day a little bit more interesting. I think that's mostly this, more than something that's below. We don't have to go too deep to look too deep into this. I think it's, they try to make their day a little bit more interesting and have some interaction. Sometimes it can be brutal, sometimes less. Then that's excess of energy they have. It's not always.
Because I had the same experience at the airport.
Yeah.
I knew we were being picked up by somebody, and I thought, you know, it would be cool if we walk out the airport and we have our camera ready and we film something, because we always make a little backstage video. And actually I was almost kicked out of the airport because, and this was way beyond the passport control, right? Because I don't even dare to take out a camera there. And I was holding the Sony Handycam, just a normal consumer camera. We went to the conveyor belt to get our luggage, and then from the luggage we went through customs, and there was no passport control, nothing there. And I thought, okay, now there's the door, I'm gonna go through the door, and I love to see the people waiting for other people.
Yes.
And I like to film that. And I already opened up the camera, but I held it like this, so it was pointing backwards, so it was clearly that I wasn't filming anybody. The moment I walked across the corner, 2 security guards came at me, and one said in French, and he didn't speak any English, and the only thing I knew, he pointed at my camera, and he was immediately like, no filming, no. And I was like, a tourist, no. And I think at that moment he was in doubt between that I had to show him that I didn't film anything on the airport and letting me go. And in the end, he really looked at me like, okay guy, you're very lucky, just walk on, but turn off the camera. So adding that up to what we did in Dubai, where you could film literally everybody and everything on the airport, except of course the areas like in America and also in the Netherlands where there's stated no photography or filming. So that was a little bit scary for me. And I know a lot of the people who watch are into street photography, and they would love to go to Morocco or to Dubai or England. So that's why I always ask, what's your opinion on that?
So it's, first of all, you need to understand what's possible to do and not possible to do in Morocco. Photography, that's not a problem. In Morocco, you can shoot anything you want. That's not a problem. Now, filming, it's another story. You cannot. We're also in video production. We do movies for companies, institutional movies or things like that. You cannot film anything 1 second in the street without an authorization. You have to go to the administration and say, okay, this is the movie I want to make, and I'm going to shoot from this date and from this time to this time, and this is what I'm going to shoot, and I have to authorize this. And if you don't have that paper, you cannot shoot anything. So that's, first of all, that's the law. There is a public organization that handles this. So whatever is filmed is controlled in Morocco. That's historic constraint that now everybody does. All the production companies deal with, and we have many people. All the guard keepers in the streets. A lot of them are a little bit paid by administration, so they can check that nobody is actually filming. And then if they see someone, they go, they have like all these messengers going, and then they come and they will ask you for that papers. Be sure if you go with your camera and you start filming in the street, wait for like half hour, you'll have someone coming to you and they will know that you were there filming.
Even as a tourist?
Even as a tourist. I mean, because they don't know if you're a tourist. So maybe they can come and they ask you whether whatever you're filming is, they can ask you, but they will wonder what you're doing, what you're filming. In the airport, maybe maybe they consider this as a sensitive place. Of course, if you're not on the beach, that's not a problem. They will come and they will see, okay, that's not a problem. You're a tourist filming the sunset, that's not a problem. But there is that conversation. They will come and check.
That's a good
warning. And then they will let you, of course, go. That's not. I mean, it's not a bad. They don't come aggressively in most cases, but they will come and check and say, okay, just we check that everything is okay. Now, airports or something close to administration and all that, maybe they thought that you were trying to make a journalistic movie about how they handle security, about how they handle customs and all that. So they're like, okay, no, in this area normally we don't film, and that's okay.
And if I would walk there with my photo camera, no problem?
No, with the photo camera, that's not a problem. Although you have that video option in that photo camera, that's a way to get around very easily. But if you come with your shoulder, but even with touristic camera, if they see it, it's better to avoid, I would say.
Okay, that's a great tip.
Yes.
Now, when people go to Morocco, and tomorrow I will have a guided tour through Morocco, Casablanca, so I will put those images, I promise now I will put a slideshow of those images at the end of this interview. And we're going to put some images from you guys in there, from the studio, so our viewers can see how your studio looks.
Of course.
Now, somebody will come to Morocco, they will see this interview and they will say, man, I loved it, Casablanca, and I want to go there. Do you have some tips for photographers? Video guys we already know, don't go. Or film
it's not
very...
don't go. I mean, it takes some planification.
Yeah.
It's some planning. You have to be aware, and then there is a procedure for that. I mean, a lot of movies are being filmed in Casablanca, in Morocco. Morocco is a country where a lot of movies are being shot for Hollywood, and we have big studios for that. But it takes some planning, and you get to know a little bit how it works.
Okay, but for
photography, tips. Really, it's Casablanca or Morocco, because it's...
Let's do Morocco and Casablanca.
Okay, I'll start with Casablanca. Casablanca mostly is... it's a city that's full of hidden treasures. It's a city that's pretty new. It has like 100 years. And it was being built by the French when they were a colony from France. And really, like the architecture of some buildings in Casablanca has nothing to envy from buildings in other capitals in Europe or in New York, and we have some very nice architectural buildings in Casablanca that are really worth taking picture of, and also the life. I mean, this is Morocco. You have some souks, some colors that's very interesting to take. There is some activity. I mean, people walk around everywhere. You have people who are cleaning shoes, people who are selling different things that you are not used to, and these are things that you're not that you don't see anywhere. So I think that's very interesting, just to walk around a little bit on the streets, go downtown, and then try to spot those arches you can see on the streets with the
we have some nice arches next to our hotel. They're yellow.
Oh, yes,
McDonald's.
The McDonald's. There is 8 McDonald's in Casablanca. That's too much for us, but yes, that Casablanca. I think it's mostly architecture and trying to capture the life, the movements of people around the city. And Morocco, we have everything. We have for landscapes, we have the sea, mountains, the desert, so the plains as well. We have everything, and also different cultures, because we have the north is very different from the south. Different clothing styles from different regions. So it's very also interesting to take picture of different doors. The doors, we have many different style of doors depending on which cities. It can be also a very interesting aspect of it. And I mean, of course, as a photographer, you need also the eye and
Structures.
It's full of and structures, exactly. And it's very different styles of photography. Sports. There's also sport. We have capital of surfing, so it's
Okay.
very diverse, exactly, for different kind of photographers.
Now, what are your plans for the future for your photo studio?
Well, our plan really is to keep positioning ourselves as the leader, because today we're the only professional studio. We'd like to keep improving ourselves, always raising the bar up, because we can always do better, and keep proposing new offers to our customers, improve the quality, and keep the service high. I think that's remain the leader and try to always the extra step. Don't stagnate. If you stagnate, you
die.
You die, exactly. So that's important for us.
Okay, I would like to thank you very much for the interview. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being our host and friend.
Well, thank you for coming. It was a big pleasure to have you.
I
And
hope I will be back.
Oh, yeah, you will be back. That's for sure.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Hey guys, a very quick tip for the Xrite Color Checker Passport. Now, the Xrite Color Checker Passport is very important in your workflow. It makes sure that you have a profile for your camera. It's like calibrating your monitor. You have to make sure that the colors are accurate. Now, you can't do that with only a gray card, because the gray card will only remove the color cast. Now, the color checkers from Xrite, those are really great. This is the Color Checker Passport. It's a small device, you can put it in your pocket. It's a great device to make a profile, and it has a plugin for Photoshop Lightroom, and it's a very, very simple thing to do. Within seconds you have a profile. Now, the important thing about the Color Checker Passport is that you evenly light it. In other words, make sure that even if you use high contrast lighting, the color checker is aimed towards the light source, change your position and shoot it as flat as possible. Now, this is of course an Xrite Color Checker Passport tip, but it's not about workflow, it's something more basic. If I close my Xrite Color Checker Passport, what I see is Apple logos. Now, why do I have Apple logos on it? It's not because I'm an Apple fanboy, I do love Apple products, but it's very simple. It's a black color checker. Meaning if you have a dark studio like we have, well, now all the lights are on, but normally when the lights are off, it's like my third or fourth color checker, because I keep losing them in the studio. And then later on, Anna cleans up and she said, Frank, I found a color checker. So I have 4 of those laying around. So I started putting stickers on it. So now in the dark, I can see my color checker. So that's the tip for today. If you have a Color Checker Passport, and you should have one, put a sticker on it. And it doesn't have to be an Apple sticker, of course, but something that emits lights or something that's white. Because now in the dark, you can find back your Color Checker Passport.
Hey, Jimmy Beach here with Alien Skin Software. In this video, we'll focus our attention on the new lightning effect in iCandy 7. Most of iCandy is oriented toward graphic design rather than photography, but lightning is realistic enough that it can be used on photos too. I'll show you how. I already have an image open in iCandy. I'll press the Effects button and choose Lightning. As a first step, I'll move the start and end points in the preview panel. Let's place the lightning in a natural position in the image. I usually start the bolt on the underside of a cloud. I also look for an area lighter than its surroundings, hinting at the glow coming from the lightning. For the end point, this sharp ground plane is a good place for the lightning to strike. For precise control and to see more detail, I'm going to zoom in. I'll switch to the zoom tool and then drag around the area I'm interested in. Now I can see better to adjust the start and end points. After I get the points where I want them, I'll change to the Hand tool to make the control points disappear. This way I have a better view of my workspace. Change back to the Adjustment tool if you want to move them again. Now I'll look through the factory presets. As we mouse over the presets, the navigator shows what they'll look like. Notice that the start and end points are not moved by a factory preset. The presets are separated into 2 categories. Normal is for lightning that tapers to a point, which is good for lightning hitting the ground. Solid arc is for lightning that remains thick along its length and is better for lightning between clouds. The navigator is handy for quick browsing, but let's see what some of the presets look like in our image. I'll go with this one. Now let's customize it a little using the controls on the right. On the Basic tab, arc thickness usually needs to be adjusted. Lightning has a random component that I usually experiment with for each scene. At the bottom of the Basic tab, hit the Random Seed button until you like the path and branching. If you need to go back, just use Undo and Redo. Now let's switch to the Glow tab. I'll adjust the flash at the start of the bolt so it looks like the cloud is glowing around it. I'll squash the perspective to fit the scene. I'll adjust the glow intensity by experimenting with glow width and opacity. You can make a really brilliant glow, but in this case, I'm going to keep it pretty soft. For realistic lightning, use white for the inner color, which is in all of the factory presets. A pale outer color can be dramatic, but if you're going for realism, then keep it pretty close to white. And now we're done. That looks pretty good. After all that work, let's make sure we can create the effect again later. I'll save it as a user preset. Remember that factory presets don't change the start and end points. In contrast, user presets do set the lightning position. Notice that as I click on these user presets, the preview shows the lightning in different positions. And that's all for the lightning effect video. This is Jimmy Beach. Thanks for watching.